In this episode, I speak with the gorgeous Sam Frost. She's an actress. You might have seen her on Home and Away or The Bachelorette. She is also a mental health advocate and brand new author of the book Believe. Honestly, I've interviewed a lot of people, from those with a higher profile in the public eye to those who are just friends and acquaintances of mine, and I must say, Sam really wears her heart on her sleeve. This was such a vulnerable, beautiful conversation. I remember being a 20-year-old watching Sam on The Bachelor, living this fairy tale life, just, looking like the quintessential Australian girl living a romance, and it looked like she had everything to me at that time. And to have this conversation and see what was really going on for her were things that, we can guess at. We can assume these things about when we see a very perfect image presented on social media or on reality TV. But to really hear it in her words was a whole other level of validation and really understanding. And I just appreciate her honesty so much. I know you guys will. In her book, Believe, she's really sharing everything about the challenges she's faced with depression, anxiety, social media, toxic relationships, body image issues, and grief. And we dive into as much as we can of it in this beautiful 1 hour interview. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed connecting with Sam. It's a really special one. Okay, let's go to the show. Sam Frost, hello, lovely. I could not be more thrilled to be chatting with you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting.
Without making it awkward, I got to say, you were always my favorite on The Bachelor, on The Bachelorette. Loved you so much. And it's just been amazing watching your journey and your career as things have evolved over the last few years for you.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Hey, it just seems like a lifetime ago. Sometimes I feel like I've had 9 different lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that very, very naive 24-year-old who was just, had no idea of the world really. Everything that would evolve from that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I feel very grateful.
I can only imagine the pressure you would have felt too at that time, suddenly having this identity thrust upon you of who you're meant to be based on, basically Australia's sweetheart at that time, and the pressure to kind of be perfect.
Yeah, do you know, it was really funny. Just literally 20 minutes ago, I was with one of my girlfriends, Grace, and we're just at the supermarket. And she said to me, she goes, "Do you feel like you always have to do the right thing?"
Mm.
And it was because I never really thought about it, because it was something simple, like I just let someone go in front of me at the checkout, and I hadn't thought about it, but I was like, I guess there is kind of a pressure to or to be mindful of how of how you're behaving at all times,
Yeah.
that I am naturally a polite and considerate person, but I think people have that meet you have like a 30-second interaction with you sometimes, and depending on what kind of day you're having, they might not see the best version of you. You might be quiet, stressed, overwhelmed, sad, and um, sometimes there is an expectation of what people think you are,
Yeah.
and hoping that you are able to meet them there. But at the same time, you can't live your life like that. You have to live it authentically and real and raw, and not let that sort of thing consume you. But yeah, it's funny because it really threw me when she said that, because I just never really thought about it. But I think on a subconscious level, I probably am.
Totally. And I can totally understand.
Yeah, but in the same respect, I'm always one of those people. Like, if I ever hear people saying something like, "Oh, this actor isn't very nice," and I'm like, "Oh, how do you know that?" And I always ask people how they know that. I'm like, "How do you know that?" And then they'll be like, "Oh, well, one of my friends," and I go, "Have you ever thought maybe they're having a bad day?" And I think it's something that we need to keep in mind, because these sorts of rumors and conversations about, you know, these interactions you have with people can have an effect on them, their reputation as well. So anyway, I just went on that little tangent,
No,
but
I love a tangent, and I think
yeah,
that's so appropriate given as well this like cancel culture we're in, where it's just like Ellen cancelled because, you know, maybe she was caught in a few bad moments where she was, you know, feeling pressure. Like, who even knows? Have you got any idea what it's like to be in that person's shoes?
yeah. And I always think to people, like, I mean, I always think to myself, everyone makes mistakes. Everyone says things and they go, gee, I probably shouldn't have said that, or that could have been taken out of context, or, you know, we're human beings. There's all do better. We could handle things differently. But as long as you're accountable and you're self-aware, there's room for growth and learning. But yeah, and I always think, if a microscope was under everyone, I'm sure there would be plenty of things that they've said and done wrong, or things they could have done differently. So the idea of just going, actually, no, all of a sudden we're going to rip that person down and cancel them is just, I mean, I don't think it's, I'm not about it at all. I just think it's not a great way to live. I think we should be a bit more compassionate for other people. Yeah, because no one's perfect. And I'm far from perfect, and I think a lot of people would feel the same. But yeah.
100%. And I mean, how confusing, because we get these messages of like, you've got to be real and authentic, but at the same time, real and authentic might be that you're in a crappy mood today, or you're going through something really hard in your life right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's like people are like, yeah, just be yourself, just be yourself, as long as it's in these guidelines and you don't upset one. We've all got the same opinion, and you know, I feel like, you know, I had a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. I was talking about how these days people are editing themselves as they're talking, and people are so mindful of not of saying the right thing, that I don't think we're having honest conversations. I think people are too scared to share how they're really feeling. I think it kills all creativity. You know, people are just trying to dodge these landmines of doing the right thing, and like, oh, are people going to be upset if I do this, or are people going to be upset if I post that? And you're constantly thinking of all the ways that things can be taken out of context, instead of just living your life and hoping that if you do make a mistake, you're treated with compassion and forgiveness, which is the right, well, I believe is the right way to live. But anyway.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And, you know, Sam, one of your greatest strengths that I've always, you know, noticed, just, you know, being one of those people watching you from afar, is how vulnerable you are, and how you've managed to maintain that, even though I'm sure that's been really, really hard sometimes. Have you ever had people kind of tell you like to tone it down a bit, or kind of, oh, maybe you shouldn't have, you know, opened up so much about that? Do you get that sort of feedback at times, kind of people wanting to keep you in a box?
Yeah, sometimes, for sure. I think certainly at the end of last year, when I was talking about the struggles that I was having with all the pressure and trying to make it in that environment, it was really difficult for me personally. But yeah, and there were some friends of mine that are like, oh, you probably shouldn't have said that, and you know, they might be right, but ultimately I already put it out there, so.
Well, and here's the other thing, right? Like, anything that you've said at some point that maybe you like later regretted, what's the worst thing that happens after some time has gone by, and that, like, let's say a storm has rolled through? Like, what, you get some trolls?
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, so you get, and it's just yeah, there are sometimes people that are probably like, maybe you don't have to share so much. My brother said it to me once. He's just like, yeah, sometimes, you know, Sam, you don't have to tell everyone exactly how you're feeling all the time. And you know, and maybe he's right, but I don't know. I just think as human beings, there's a strength in vulnerability, and there's you know, I always love human connection. And I think that we create connections by being vulnerable, by letting our guards down and connecting to each other. And I think ultimately, as cliche as it sounds, I think we're all pretty similar. Like, I feel like you can make a connection with anyone in this world, no matter what age, no matter what their upbringing was, whatever it is. If you're vulnerable and you're, you let your guard down and you're open, I think you can make connections with anybody. And I really value that. So I don't think I'm going to change, or, maybe I might think twice before I post on social media.
Nah, don't change. Don't change, because do you know what? If we're all trying to keep it all in, keep our, like, I'm not going to say like you've said anything crazy, but like the crazy in, let's just say that the part of us that wants to share everything and has maybe like different thoughts and stuff, if we don't share that, then we all perpetuate this myth that there's like a normal, and you in your own little world, you must be outside of that because everyone around you is not talking about it. Whereas if we share these things and we're like, yeah, today was really, really hard, suddenly it's normal, you know?
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
Sam, there's no way I would be like, sometimes on my Instagram, I'll post like a photo of me with tears and like just show people like, here I am crying right now. I'm not always, perfectly got the makeup on and everything. And there's no way I'd be doing stuff like that if it wasn't for way back. I remember when you used to post like photos of like no makeup selfies, like you were doing it before it was cool.
Yeah. And I think it's quite nice to do that. I think again, it comes back to human connection, and it comes back to ultimately what we all want to feel is accepted. We all want to feel like we have, people understand us and we're not alone. That's ultimately what we want to feel like. And that's certainly, I remember, like I would post no makeup selfies and things like that years ago. And it was also for me I was also doing it to try and tell myself it was okay too.
Yeah.
Because I can be a very self-conscious person, and and especially when you start seeing someone and you're being vulnerable, and then they see you without makeup, and you just get, and all these insecurities that you had when you were 7 years ago, they're still under the surface. And I think that sharing them publicly, and to have people say, I don't know exactly how you feel, and I think that I think it's important to keep those conversations happening, and to make people feel accepted, because like, especially social media, man, like, so like sometimes I'm scrolling through and there's all these everyone's so beautiful, and when you're sitting at home, you got no makeup on, you feel all scrappy and gross, and you're like, ugh, and you're looking at it, you're like, I'm not good enough. And even as an adult who's, I like to think that I've worked a lot with psychologists and on my self-worth, and I still go, oh, I feel shit, this is making me feel crap, like, and I have to delete, and when you've got people like yourself sharing your vulnerable days and days where you're not having a great time, I think it keeps it real and fresh, and like, and it's refreshing for people to go, oh yeah, not everyone has it together, and so however I'm feeling is okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Sam, speaking of sharing this message and helping people to feel more accepted, you have finished your amazing book, Believe, which is out on the 30th of March, which when this goes to air, we will be in that zone where it's been released.
Yeah.
To everyone, tell me I think we're going to know what was behind this, but what was the moment where you were like, I'm going to write a book?
Yeah. Well, I got approached by the publisher who had been following my career, and she had looked at the Believe mental health website that I have, and I share little stories here and there, and she's like, I think that there's space for this to grow into something bigger than just a website. And so we spoke, and I could tell that she understood me. And for me, one of the most important things is feeling like someone can see me for me, particularly when I'm working with them. And she completely understood my purpose, and we were just on the exact same page, and so it was a really effortless no-brainer for me. Like, of course it's hard being, so exposed. Like, you just literally go, cool, here's all my baggage in this book. There you go. Except, and also it was hard writing the book because there's things that I can't talk about because it affects other people.
Yeah.
So
Did
I
you
didn't
have to use code names, like different names for some people?
we had to change some details about some things so they can't be justified. But yeah, but mostly, like, it's hard to talk about the reason why you are the way you are without being able to talk about your childhood and and past traumas that you've had, because then I think it's easier to join the dots as to why I am the way that I am. But in saying that, I did share a lot about toxic relationships, social media, depression, anxiety, and what we hope for is, it's the same reason why you do your posts as well, like when you're being vulnerable, is to make sure people feel validated, to make sure they feel accepted for exactly who they are. And I want it to be a book that people can always go back to. My sister shares tips and tools for how to get out of, when you're in, an anxiety triggered cycle, or depression, or how to practice self-care and all these things. And so we're hoping that people can always go back to it when they feel like they need a friend, or they need support, or they just want to feel, like they're not alone. So of it. And I hope, I'm not a writer, and the book's not perfect, and I'm not perfect, but I kind of like it. There are things reading it again, you go, oh, I could have edited that out, I could have done this, like, oh, there's a typo there. But at the end of the day, the whole thing is, that's not the point of the whole book. The whole point of the book is to embrace the imperfections. So yeah,
and get it out there.
And get it out there. That's right.
And that subheading, learning to live with yourself and all your glorious imperfections.
Yeah, that's right. And because I don't know about you, but when I was in my early 20s, for example, I thought, like, definitely my late teens and my early 20s, I just thought I was just such a fuck up. I'm not sure if I can swear.
No, you can swear. Everything's welcome here.
I just felt like I was a fuck up, and I just felt like I couldn't get anything right. I felt like my mental health was going to affect me my whole life. I felt like I was never going to be able to be in a relationship. I was never going to be able to be happy. And I was like, I remember thinking, when is it going to end? Like, when do I get to catch my break? Like, in terms of my own happiness, like, when am I going to be happy? And then it's just amazing when you actually do the work and you work on your trauma, and you are focused on yourself and your commitment to growing and healing. I think it's pretty magical how far you can go. I know I've certainly completely transformed. And yeah, and I think that's also why it's definitely why I'm so passionate about talking about mental health, but it's also a reason why I want to write the book, because I just feel like saying to people, I'm like, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to cannot keep going. You cannot get out of bed, and you just go, oh, I've got goosebumps. That feeling of being like, I can't possibly live another day. I know that it happens all the time to me in my life. And if you push through and you try to find the light and you do the work, it gets easier and it gets better. But you can't, and even when you're in it and people are saying that, they're like, oh, you're going to be okay. It's hard for you to believe it.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to share their stories of their hardship, and share their moments of, struggle, and because you never know who it's going to affect. You never know. Someone could read it and go, that's this story, someone else has been through it too, and look at them now. And I don't know, I just think it's really powerful.
100%. And Sam, thank you so much for sharing that, because when I think back to who I was watching you, and I'm just using me as an example of like how so many other young women would have been watching you on The Bachelorette, on The Bachelor, you could not have been more of this like image of perfect. And it's like at that time for you, you were like, or, you know, maybe before that, you were like, I'm a fuck up.
Oh, absolutely. During Bachelor, I absolutely felt like I was such a fuck up.
How
Like,
crazy. We would have thought, like, everyone was like, this girl is the epitome of what life is all about, what it is to have a perfect life.
which is crazy. And it's also a nice reminder that you just never know what's going on for people behind closed doors. And people talk about it all the time and they'll post on social media, but it's very true. You just have no idea. And also what is painful for one person, just because other people have had it worse, it doesn't take away their pain. It's all relative. Like it's relative. And one thing that I think that we have in this culture that needs to change is people, you know, if someone's talking about a struggle they have, like if, you know, if they've lost their job, for example, then someone will say, oh yeah, but that family over there lost their house. And you're like, I know that that's painful and I know that's really sad for that family, but that I still am feeling like this. And it doesn't take the pain away. It just makes you feel misunderstood. It makes you feel like no one gets it. And if anything, it isolates people even more.
Yeah, there's no permission to feel what you're feeling because, hey, there's starving kids in Africa.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we just beat ourselves up even more for feeling shit.
And then people are less likely to reach out because they'll feel like their struggles aren't acceptable, aren't you know, warranted for feeling the way that they feel. But whatever you're feeling and whatever struggles you have, if that is painful for you, that's like there's no comparison. We can't keep comparing each other's stories and each other's trauma to each other, to everybody else, and trying to be like, well, that's not important, or because this person's had it worse, so you should be grateful. And that type of language doesn't help, and it just makes people, as I said, less likely to reach out and isolate themselves even more, which is very dangerous. It's so dangerous, especially when you're in a negative headspace.
And while I think it's really important to not like linger in the victim mentality more than we need to, more than is you know, whatever is healthy for us, it's probably only been the last few years that I've felt entitled to and to have that permission to use the word trauma to describe some things I went through in my early life and childhood too, because there's one version of that story which is like, I had a happy childhood and everything was okay.
Yeah. Well, your trauma was, you know, if that was an integral part of your growth and who you are as a person, and if that was traumatic for you, and then that's trauma. Like, we can't take it away from people, because, and I am completely with you. Like, I get frustrated with the victim mentality as well, but I think there is space to feel what you need to feel, you're allowed to have compassion for yourself and be like, this is shit, this hurts, and you can have a moment of that, accept it, feel what you need to feel, and then, you know, it's when you get stuck in that victim mentality, that's when you can go down a tricky cycle and spiral quite badly. But I think that we just need to hold a bit more space to be like, okay, I'll actually give myself time limits. So, like, if I am feeling really shitty about a situation, I will literally say, oh, swear to God, I did this. All right, Sam, you've got an hour to feel sorry for yourself. And so I'll be like, sit in my bed and cry and be like, this hurts, and cry and be like, you know, whatever it is. And I'm like, all right, it's time to put your phone away and just do an activity, get out of the house, go for a drive. But I'll give myself permission to feel what I need to feel and then try and get out of it.
Yeah. And that's so important, rather than just jumping to the, like skipping ahead to the just trying to get out of it, which I think is where so many of us trip ourselves up.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when, people create distractions, and then some people are so busy trying to get out of it that they haven't felt they need to feel. So they're like distract, whether it be, drinking or partying or going to the gym or seeing friends or like sleeping with people or whatever your distraction is. And then it always is, you go and go and go and go and go, and then you stop, and then it just comes back on top of you, and you're like, oh no, you can't outrun this stuff. You can't outrun grief, whether it's grief of a of a job, of a friendship, of whatever it is. You can't outrun it, and that's
it's it's like trying to stop the sky from raining is kind of how I see it. It's like we got our own internal weather systems.
That's a great way to see it, actually. I never thought of that.
Yeah. So Sam, looking at, you really kind of grew up in the public eye in many ways. Like 24 is not old in a sense of, you were still just such a baby at that point in terms of, I'm sure, like how you felt in life and when you look back at yourself then. Where I think it's interesting for those who have not been so in the public eye, because there's this sense that these people are on a pedestal, and these people who are like on TV and, getting interviewed on the morning show and things like that are somehow immune to the challenges of life, especially on those kind of shows and situations where the smile is important and don't go too deep. And so do you have a story to share about one of those times in the public eye that was quite challenging and dark for you, that maybe people didn't know was going on?
Oh, all the time.
A million?
All the time. Like, anytime, my weight fluctuates a lot, and anytime I've been really skinny, which it like, I remember I was I on home and away? Yeah, I was on home and away, and I was just going through a lot in my life, like just just a lot in my life, and I was just really struggling to wake up, and I was really struggling to get motivated and just get through the days, and I was just like, God, when will this life end? You just get in that headspace. And I realized that I had this beautiful life. I had a job that I loved, I had a beautiful home, I have my 2 dogs, and I had all these beautiful things that I was so grateful for, but I wasn't happy inside, and I was so sad. I would cry all the time. I'd lost heaps of weight. People were constantly commenting on my weight. I'm like, that's not helping. Because, what usually happens, what my psych told me, is when you feel out of control of your life, or when I feel out of control of my life, when I feel like all these external circumstances or these external things are happening, and I feel out of control, I subconsciously control what I eat. And so if I don't do this on a conscious level at all, but in the back of my mind, what I can control is my food, and that's the only thing I can do. So if I'm depriving myself and not eating, and I'm making myself even more unwell, like it's and I've had to work hard to create really healthy habits, and now I like to think I'm quite fit and healthy, and I have a good routine, because I kept doing this. I kept I would deprive myself of food, and then that feeling of being hungry was a satisfying feeling for me, because it meant that I was in control of my life. And it was it was super messed up. Like, that's something that I've had to work on with my psychologist quite a lot, actually. But yes, and all this sort of stuff is happening while you're still working 12 hours on home and away. You're going to Palm Beach, you're smiling, you're doing your job, you're learning your lines, you're going on the morning show, you're doing this. I remember one time I went on the morning show, actually, and I was like so unwell at that time. Like, I was just really mentally unwell, and I wasn't eating. And I had no energy, and I was weak and frail. And I just remember just sitting on the couch, and I'm like, I can't. So when you're not eating or sleeping and you're really stressed, you can't think and you can't talk. And I just remember sitting there being like, I was just praying, like, I was just like, oh man, I just hope something helps me through this. And I'd be like, I've got 3 minutes on the couch. That's all you got to get through, Sam, just 3 minutes. And I sat down, I was really nervous. Usually I love doing live interviews and radio, like it's fun. But I was really nervous because I just wasn't in a good headspace. I got through it fine. You would never pick it from a mile, like you would never pick it. And which is why I think it's really interesting to always be mindful when you're making comments, when people are sitting on their couch making comments about people, you know, you just don't, as I said, you just don't know what people are going through. Yeah. And they're smiling on the outside and they're happy and positive and bubbly. I'd go to work and I'm laughing, making jokes, this, that, and the second you get out, you're just like, oh God, now I have to deal with all my life again. And like, it's just, yeah, you would use work as a distraction and then go home and just cry all night. And I hated the weekends because it meant I had to be alone with my thoughts.
And it's so, what's really standing out to me there is how good you can be at hiding it. And not just you, so many of us, we put on this smiley face and then you're the one walking around with the storm clouds in your head, feeling shit about life. And you think everyone else is happy.
Yeah.
We're all just, so many of us are pretending.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's really amazing when, I remember I saw this post on socials and it was these, all these like actors and comedians that all had all these smiling faces and they were all the people that had taken their own lives. Wow. And I remember that stuck with me so much because, you know, from the outside, it looks like they had it all together. They're smiling. They're comedians, for goodness sake. Like they're these A-list actors and they're musicians and you just think, wow, you know, people dream of getting to that or they sit at home and wonder what it would be like. And all these people, they're all exactly the same as us. Like they all have their struggles and they all suffer really hard, and you just have to, everything's all relative, as I keep saying, like it's just everything is relative in your life. Like if that's painful for you, no matter where you are and however you see yourself or what job you have, we are all the same, every single and it's important to remember that
no one gets a free ride.
Exactly.
Looking at how challenging some of these things have been for you, and with that last concept in mind too, do you ever have like regrets? Like, do you ever just wish I wasn't in the public eye and you could have gone through things differently?
I don't. I mean, certainly I've learned from a lot of things. Like there are a lot of things that I think, yeah, I probably could have done that better. Probably shouldn't have said that. Probably, you know, there are things you could always do better. And there are lessons in everything. But ultimately, I'm quite a spiritual person, so I truly believe that I have a purpose to fulfill, and whether that's, and when I'm working in the mental health space, I feel like this is my purpose, and you can feel it. You can feel when you're in the flow of life and whether it's you're getting resistance or I don't know. So I don't really believe in regrets because I feel like everything happens as it's meant to. And the challenges we face, had we not had those challenges, we wouldn't be the people we are. Had we not faced hardship, we wouldn't appreciate the light. And I genuinely believe that. And, you know, sometimes it is hard being in the public eye, but the universe gave this to me. And so I have deep trust and faith in the universe that this is my job and this is what I have to do. And all I can do is have good intentions and be a good person. And if I put good back out into the world, then good's going to come back to me. And that's how I live my life.
Beautiful. That's so amazing. And I totally agree. There's no point going into regrets because what's happened has happened. And this is how it is. I'm curious, Sam, a question kind of popped into my head earlier when we were talking about the people making comments on your weight. Did you ever notice a sort of more of a trajectory of comments from women versus men commenting on your weight?
Absolutely. I mean, I shouldn't say only, actually. The majority of negative comments I get come from women. Like, I rarely get a negative comment from a man. I don't understand what it is. I mean, I've got a friends of mine. My brother did Survivor, and friends of mine through him, actually, my brother's friends that I'm tagged along with, are getting quite negative comments. And one of the women on the show, Sam, is copying it quite badly, and it's all these women picking apart her appearance because of how she's playing the game. And she's such a beautiful person, and you just think, well, I don't understand why it seems to be women bringing women down. I mean, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't live in a world like that. All my friends are amazing. I've got beautiful women in my life that we've got a real sisterhood. So I don't understand that mentality. I don't know whether it's because they're insecure of themselves or if they're jealous. I don't know. I don't get it. I'm not going to pretend I get it.
Yeah. All I know is that it's certainly not the right direction we want to be heading.
Yeah.
And we've got enough pressure on each other to then go past that wounding and that pressure onto other women too. It's crazy.
And it also bothers, it bothers me that people will say that they support women and they're all about, a strong female movement or whatever it may be. And it seems as though some of those people are very quick to tear other people down and criticize them. And it's just like, I don't know if you're aware, but being a part of a sisterhood and preaching all these things, means like accepting all people. Like, you can't just say, I support women who have the same opinions as me. That's not what it is. Like, that's and how can I say, how boring. Imagine if we all just had the same opinions and we all thought the same and I couldn't think of anything worse. I love when people have different opinions to me. I love learning. I love knowing how people's brains work. I'm never going to change my opinion about someone if they think differently to me. I'm always like so intrigued by other people. And I'm just like, what is going on in the world where people can't do anything right?
Yeah.
That's like, no one can do anything right at the moment. And the internet is going, and every day they're going, who are we mad at today? What have they done? Who are we tearing down today? And I don't really understand it, to be honest.
I would say, little do these people know, when you're out there to judge and we all judge, like, on some level, right? Like, not going to pretend like I don't judge things as well. But at the end of the day, when you're in that judgmental energy, you're only hurting yourself and you're only making life less fun.
Correct. And absolutely correct. And I always think, like, of how I always think about people's energy. Like, I always think about, if you're that type of person that watches something, let's use the Survivor example. If you're watching something and you're so angry about how someone's playing a game or how they're on bloody Survivor or whatever it is, I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
You're that you're going to then go on social media, find their page and say awful comments about what they look like. I can't imagine living with such dark and heavy energy. You can't be happy. Like, that means everything that anyone does would annoy you. And I just think, oh my God, aren't you exhausted? Like,
totally.
Like, let it. Whew. Like, something might pop into your head about something. You might not like the way someone's playing a game on a show. That's fine. Just be like, oh, that's, whatever. But you don't have to then go out of your way to then troll someone and say negative comments, because you're just weighing yourself down and you're not living your life fully. And your life would be miserable, surely.
You know what's interesting, Sam? We all kind of think about, I don't know if you watched that Russell Crowe movie, Gladiator, right?
Yeah.
It's just basically, showing that time in humanity where we would find entertainment in watching two men rip each other apart, and the blood and the gore, and that was entertainment. And we can all look at that and be disgusted and shocked at that. Like, how can humanity do that? We're doing the exact same thing.
100%. 100%. That is exactly what we're doing right now. Except we're doing it on social media and we're hiding behind identity that's not ours. And I think that social media should have a responsibility to validate people's identity or whatever it may be. So they can't hide behind a username. And if you want to say something awful about someone, you have to say, I'm Sam Frost, and I think that you're ugly, like, or whatever it may be. Like, I mean, I would never, but you have to have some form of accountability, because these people are being so nasty and disgusting. And even like one of my girlfriends, she just works in a small office in Sydney, and she's getting bullied by someone in her workplace. And she realised, because the accounts were linked, and she's been getting all these nasty comments, and you just think people shouldn't be allowed to hide anymore, because this is ridiculous. It's getting out of control and people are taking their own lives. This is the reality of it. And especially, we've been in a pandemic for 2 years, and so people have been isolating in their homes. The only thing they have for human connection is their phones. And if you're getting bullied and trolled and consumed by negativity, like, that is extremely detrimental to your mental health. And at what cost? So I think that would be that they've got to introduce something or take responsibility, because this is a serious issue. And I can't imagine what it's like being a teen. Like, I know how hard it is being a 33-year-old, like, let alone a teenager that's trying to figure out who they are, to try and, you know, learn life's lessons and shift and morph. And, you know, I don't know how people are even doing it. I don't know how they're surviving. It's seriously so bad.
I'm so concerned about the filters, and like, because we can use the filters or see other people using the filters. You can kind of see around it, but it's like the teenagers that are just like, that is your identity, that, like, whatever that filter does, or what do you call it, face tune or whatever. It's so scary.
I can't stand the filters that change your face structure.
Yeah.
Like, I'm mad for a filter. Like, you know, if it's like, you know, oh, it's makes you look, you know, nice and tanned or whatever, I'm like, all right, that's fine. Like, I don't do it all the time, but I'm like, I can understand that. But when it's changing your actual face structure, I'm just like, and then people are using them all the time. I see it all the time. Like, even, you know, people come up and say, you know, they might ask for a picture or so, they'll put the filter on, and then because they're like, oh, I only take a photo with this filter. And I was like, that's sad. It's basically saying you're prettier if your lips are bigger, if your thing, and then, anyway, and then you can just go down that whole.
There's a whole tangent there about like how cut off we are from reality, basically.
It's really sad, and it's really sad.
So, okay, that's a nice segue here. Reality. When we grow up, I don't know if you're like me, growing up with like Disney movies or like the rom-coms, and we see these fairy tales of how life's meant to be and how life's meant to play out. And then we kind of grow up, we go through life, and we have disappointment after disappointment, all the fairy tales turning into things gone wrong. It shouldn't have gone like this. It should have been like that. And, you know, we find ourselves in these really challenging situations. And you've mentioned those episodes you've been through. Sam, how do we believe again in life being good?
I think it's trying to find the magic in everyday small things. But I hear you. Like, so I go through stages where I can't watch anything with a love story in it, because I'm just like, bullshit. It doesn't happen. But I truly went through it. Like last year, I couldn't watch it. I was just like, this is rubbish. No guy cares about you. I was awful. But anyway, that's my own issues, and I've had to work through that. But yeah, it's I think practicing gratitude helps trying to find the magic in everyday life, and journaling and doing all those things. It does help, and it actually rewires your brain to see the positive in situations. You're more likely to be grateful for the small things. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about all I'm a bit,
Do you think there are some dreams that we just have to like let go of? Like, for example, the fairy tale romance. Or is it
yeah.
shifting it? Is it changing what it means?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think, well, I've been in situations before, and I think this goes back to the perfect romance, and sometimes I think, oh, this is I've definitely said this before. I'm like, this is a spiritual connection, but I mean,
My soulmate.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And you're like, oh, this was fate that we were brought together, and sure, yeah, like you might learn a lesson, but then when it doesn't work out, we end up, well, I should say I'll talk from my own experience. I've certainly been in situations where I'll meet someone, it's all going well, everything's great, and I'm like, this is so beautiful, this is what it's all about, blah, 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 blah. And then it doesn't work out, and then it makes you then lose your faith and your hope in romance, and it makes you not believe, because you're like, well, why did this happen? And I remember last year it happened. I was only dating this guy briefly. But then when it didn't work out, I was like, why would they do this to me? I don't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it changes. I lost hope and faith, and I was like, I'm not gonna. And then I would say to my girlfriends, I'm like, oh, because I'd be like, I'm gonna manifest, and I was like, doesn't work.
Writing the list of all the things you want.
I stopped practicing gratitude. I stopped writing my journal. I was like, nothing works. It's just a load of rubbish. Like, this is ridiculous. Romance doesn't exist. I stopped watching romance things. I was like, I was awful, man. I was awful. And now I'm much happier now. But yeah.
But do you know what, Sam? Maybe that's even part of the process, is completely giving up and completely going into the darkness and the grief of it. Like, I'm grieving this fairy tale that was promised to me when I was 5 and I watched, Beauty and the Beast and all these movies. Like, that's what's meant to happen. I do think we have to grieve it. And maybe even for those who are in relationships, there's an element of reality, that sets in. It's like people always make jokes about once you're married, like the passion dies or whatever. And there's something to grieve, I think, in every context, to then come to a place of more peace and acceptance and finding those little moments, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that for sure. And I also, you said something I was thinking of what I was going to say to that. Damn it, now I can't remember.
Was it grieving at all?
Yeah, and I actually said recently, I think I said it in an interview, I can't remember. I said recently, and it's been really playing in my mind, because because I was rambling these bloody things, and I remember thinking, like, if I told my 24-year-old self that went on The Bachelor, she thought the romance existed. She honestly was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm gonna have the opportunity to date the most beautiful man. They're searching the whole of Australia for this perfect man, and I get the opportunity to date him. And that is honestly what I thought. And I just think, oh, sweetie, and and that 24-year-old girl, that she was going to end up 33 and single, and with her 2 dogs and hanging out in her brother's spare bedroom. Like, I reckon 24-year-old Sam's whole life would have shattered and been like, what do you mean? Like, it's like, is a process to accept your situation for what it is, to not only accept it, grieve it, as you said, then accept it, and then embrace it, and then just be like, well, this is what the universe has wanted for me. And and I think you can find happiness and in yourself. And people always say, oh, I remember I used to hate when people would say, oh, you just gotta find happiness in yourself. And I was like, I am happy, I'll be happy. That would be great. Like,
yes, the pressure you've got to be completely happy and fulfilled on your own even though society is constantly pressuring you and telling you like you need a partner.
Exactly. Okay, I was just going to also on that. I had a psychologist who said this brilliant thing to me, because I was like, oh, once I heal myself, I went to this mental health retreat in February last year, and I was like, once I heal myself, then I'm going to, attract this relationship, and I'm going to find the one, and blah blah blah. And she said to me, she's like, you don't ever stop growing, you don't ever stop learning lessons. So you can't have this idea that once you're fixed, everything's going to fall into place. And she goes, you find someone who loves you for you, who's willing to grow with you, and you grow through life together, and you're always at different stages, and maybe sometimes they need growing and you need to be the support, or vice versa. And I think that's also changed my mentality to be like, well, this is who I am, and this is the life that I've lived, and to find someone who's willing to accept that and grow with you, instead of being like, I need to fix myself first. And that sort of changes your perspective a lot.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Sam, like I'm in my 30s, I've got 2 cats in my life, and I don't currently have a partner either. And it's like, why do we make that story? Like, why does that have to equal she's a sad woman?
I think that's society's expectations. It's the rom-coms. It's the things that we grew up watching, going, this is what you need to do, and you need to do it by this age. And it is so funny because, well, it's not funny, actually, because I'm not sure about you, but especially when I go back home, and I'm back home at the moment, like in Lilydale, and I can tell people instantly, like, even though I'm so happy, I've got a beautiful family, people devalue you if you're not in a relationship. I swear to God, and maybe I'm wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am.
Yeah, like we feel sorry for her.
Yeah, there's this pity that people feel on you, and you're like, I'm actually really happy, and I would much rather be me than just settle or be in a relationship I don't want to be in.
Yes.
Yeah, and people a lot of
lost you there for a sec. A lot of people, yes.
Yeah, a lot of people stay in relationships they don't want to be in because they think, well, I'm in my early 30s, and if we break up now, then I've got, then I'm going to be single at 35. And I'm like, what's wrong with that? Expectations. So people stay in things that they're not happy in because of society's pressure and people feeling pity on them, which is ridiculous.
Totally. And there's the other perspective, which is totally having the world at your feet. Like I've got some married friends with babies, and I'm like, I'm going off to live in Lisbon for 3 months this year and run my business from there. And they're like, oh, that is so cool. And it just shows like everyone's got their stuff, like everyone's got their challenges, but also their wonderful joys in their life too, no matter where you are.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think we just all need to just chill out and let people live their lives without expectation, without judgment and criticism, and just have more joy and compassion and happiness for other people. And I just think the world will be a better place. But I don't know how we're going to do that.
Well, that's another question I had for you, Sam. If you could ideally see the world going somewhere in 10 years, like, where would you like it to change, especially in that mental health space? What changes would you like to see in an ideal world?
Well, I think that there is, and this is a big statement, but I believe it, and I've experienced it myself. Is I feel like people want to talk about mental health, or they say they want to talk about mental health, until it gets ugly and uncomfortable. And then people don't want to talk about it. Like, and then people go, oh, that's a bit much, or especially what happened last year with me when I was like struggling with my mental health and all this pressure, and I just didn't know what to think. And, because my opinion was different to a lot of people, and it wasn't even my opinion as such, my hesitation was different to other people, they weren't open to talk about mental health. And I don't think that you can't post on "Are you okay" day. It's okay to say you're not okay, and you can't post on Mental Health Awareness Month if you're not willing to have these conversations that although you may not understand what they're feeling, or although you may not agree with what they're going through, I mean, that in itself just seems so messed up to even say out loud.
Yeah.
To go, you don't agree with why they're feeling upset. That's bullshit, because people should be allowed to feel however they feel. And I think that while society is changing and we are becoming more accepting of talking about mental health and we are opening up those conversations, we've got a long way to go. Because if I can tell you anything that I learned from 2021 is that people do not want to talk about mental health if it's uncomfortable and they don't agree. Like, and that is not, you can't say you're a mental health advocate. You can't share your bullshit generic posts on Mental Health Are You Okay Day when you're bullying someone who's saying they're not okay.
Yeah. And amen, sister.
Yeah, and I just think that the culture needs to change massively, and we've got a long way to go. I think that comes from being accountable. It comes from having compassion, being softer, and just trying to connect to human beings who we are at our core. Because, as I said, we're all the same, no matter where you come from, no matter what upbringing you had, whatever, we're all the same. And we just need to find those moments and those things in each other to connect each other, and to realize that everything's relative, and like, it's, yeah, and I just think we just need to be kinder and have more compassion, and I can't stress that enough.
Yeah. And, you know, Sam, I think in the work that I do, helping with anxiety, we're talking about all the worries and all the crazy thoughts in our minds all the time. So I get this different perspective where I am surrounded by the vulnerability, and I know I know how the mind works. I know how it fixates on problems. So for me to share vulnerability, I'm always like, yeah, but I know this is going on in your head too. I know this is making you feel uncomfortable, but that's just because I know that it's the truth. And this is why, Sam, you've got to keep speaking like you do. Like, don't ever let anyone be like, you shouldn't have said that, or whether that was too much. Like, it's not too much. It's vulnerable, and it's normal. It's so normal. All of it. Yeah. Oh my God. What a pleasure it has been to connect with you. You are just such a delight. And for someone who's been through so much challenge and darkness, like, you still bring so much light into this world, Sam. And I just hope you know that.
Oh, you're so beautiful. That's really beautiful.
I'm so excited for more people to get Believe in their hands. Everyone go grab Sam's amazing, beautiful book, because it is real and honest, and we need more of these stories out there in the world. Sam, is there anything you want to share with people and how they can find you? And, you know, if anyone's like, who is this chick? For some reason, they don't know who you are.
Well, I think, I mean, Instagram's a great opportunity to connect with people. And we've got all the links for our mental health stuff. We do youth workshops and all the fun things as well. So yeah, it's probably the easiest way.
Amazing. I'll make sure those links are in the show notes for everyone. You used to be Fro01 on Instagram. You've changed.
I changed. I know. I was like, I feel more grown up with Sam Frost. Like Fro. Fro01 was my high school username. So it was my school username, and my mates would always just call me Fro. And so I felt like I betrayed myself when I changed to Sam Frost. But, you know, people are like, you should be more professional and grown up. And I'm like, oh, grown up.
Oh, please. Can we just like, we got to stay children as long as we can. Have fun in this life.
Exactly.
Oh, thank you so much, Sam. Honestly, most amazing chat ever. You're a delight, and looking forward to chatting to you at some point in the future if our paths ever cross.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be nice to be face to face. I like face to face as well. That's always better.
Totally. More face to face, please.
Yep.
If you're ready for the deep dive into this work to master your anxious mind, I invite you to join the Anxiety Reset program. Over 90 days, I'll be guiding you on how to build your mental resilience, reprogram those limiting beliefs that keep you stuck in self-doubt, heal your gut, balance your hormones, nourish your mind, body, and soul. Using a combined approach of naturopathy, nutrition, hypnotherapy, and live group coaching with me, you'll feel supported and motivated to show up for yourself consistently day after day. And this is how you will experience extraordinary results. You can master your anxious mind. The best time to begin is right now. Let's do it together. You'll find the link to learn more in the show notes. Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.